Hi, Spring fans. Welcome to another installment of Spring Tips. You know, it's no secret that I quite like HTTP and hypermedia. I've had some reluctance of late with the rest because I don't know that it's also the absolute best way to build services. But HTTP itself obviously works, right? And the internet itself is the web at least is an existence proof of that scalability, of that amazing capability. And so it always seemed logical to me that we would more fully embrace it, right? If we could, if there are ways to make it more convenient, more palatable, I think it could be quite useful. And you take that sort of frustration with the overly complicated and the sort of need to add things on top of the protocol, and you get a sort of interesting inflection point in the sort of evolution of the web. That coupled with, I think, a growing frustration with the complexity of building client-side browser-based applications makes for an interesting time to be a web developer. Sometimes I just want to build an application. I just want to build a website. It's not too long ago that building a website, building an HTTP sort of HTML-based application was the fast and efficient and lean way to get something out there. It wasn't considered particularly compelling or interesting compared to a proper thick client desktop-based application, but it was quick. That was the reason, right, why it was so interesting. It was a quick, easy way to get something out, even if you had to make do with the ubiquitous compromises implied by the use of the technology. And somehow we've kind of given that up, haven't we, right? It's become this 30-year march to sort of add progressively more and more to the platform, despite the platform. And again, sometimes you just want to build a simple page and let people land on it and use it, right? It doesn't have to be a distributed systems problem for every single freaking thing. So enter HTMX, right? HTMX is not the solution to all of our problems, but it represents, I think, a sort of step in the right direction for a certain class of applications, namely those that are dynamic but not think Craigslist, not Gmail. You know what I'm saying? Think HTML pages with some dynamic behavior as opposed to applications, right? And for those applications, obviously there's a niche of technologies, a set of technologies that will work quite well. Obviously, I'm a big fan. Thank you, Evan. I'm a big fan of Vue.js. I've used Angular before with quite pleasing results. I like Svelte a fair bit as well these days. I mean, a lot of choices, right? And of course, if you're in the Java programming community, if you're a Java developer and you're using Spring, you might check out Vaadin, which makes it trivial to build a data-driven, business-centric application with components and so on. And it runs on the server side, but turns into a component UI on the client side. So it's a really compelling situation. But still, sometimes you just want a page. Sometimes you just want a page. That's all. Just a simple page with some dynamic behavior. And here, I think HTMX is like I say, a step in the right direction. What is HTMX? Well, HTMX is a library, and it's important to distinguish that from a framework in JavaScript that lets you enhance progressively HTML pages. That's right. That's it. Just the currency you traffic in HTML and HTML tags, and you can add some attributes that are then picked up by this one JavaScript library, just one. There's a one single script tag to add, and you get yourself this nice dependency. And it can do interesting things. Now, obviously, I don't have time enough to go through every possible thing that it can do, but basically these are just attributes that help you make short work of common dynamic sort of things, not least of which is sending data to the server side via form, post, or whatever, and then getting the response and updating the DOM locally with the response. This is all a very, very, very interesting sort of library, and it's making waves. It's certainly very popular these days, and it works really nicely with technologies that allow you to render HTML on the server side, like Thymeleaf. And of course, if you're a Spring user, you're probably using Thymeleaf, right? I think it's probably the most ubiquitous server-side rendering template engine at this point. And by the way, I love Thymeleaf. Thymeleaf actually is sort of in my opinion, my estimation, spiritually, the very natural successor to a long line of progressively enhanceable HTML templates, right? I was using Apache Tapestry, which is a component-oriented server-side web framework from the early 2000s. Years ago, I was using it back in 2003 when I was first learning about Spring. And the idea was that it had these HTML templates that were just you could open up the template in tools of the day, like Dreamweaver, Macromedia, then Adobe Now, Dreamweaver, Layer, Home Side, BB Edit, whatever. And it was just regular stock standard HTML. You could enhance them with custom component tags, but it was still just HTML. And the result was really quite nice to work with. A designer, a HTML developer, somebody working on the front end could take those templates, mark them up, add CSS, do whatever, and then send them, and then they could be incorporated into the server-side application and rendered accordingly. I quite like that. And it was no surprise that a few, I guess a year or two later, Jacob Hookham would come along and create Facelets, which was a progressively enhanceable HTML templating mechanism and component model for Java server faces, which stood in stark contrast to the technology of the day, which was JSP, Java server pages. I don't know anybody who liked JSP. I just don't. It was never good. Right? It was always the worst of all worlds. It was a templating technology using Java, which is anything but concise for that kind of stuff, to render HTML. And it was Java, not HTML. So you had Java code strewn about HTML, and you had HTML strewn about your Java code. And the result was that neither your developer nor your HTML front-end person would know what to do with it, right? It was just inscrutably hard to manage, maintain, and round trip. And so to see Facelets there was, I think, a very natural thing. And then fast forward, I don't know, another 5, 6, 7 years, and you get Thymeleaf. And Thymeleaf was, I think it really grew in the Spring community. My understanding is that there are some other applications of it, but it was out of the gate a very, very natural technology to use in the Spring ecosystem. And I think it sort of arose right as Spring Boot started to develop and burgeon back more than a decade ago. And it's just a very nice technology. So you might wonder, can I use HTMX, Spring Boot, and Thymeleaf together? Well, yes, you can. There's an amazing library by Wim Deblauwe. He's in Belgium, and he's a Java community legend. He's got some great blogs about all sorts of stuff, not just HTTP and hypermedia and all that, but he got this library. He put this library together which supports working with HTMX and Spring Boot and Thymeleaf together. So my friends, that's what we're going to take a look at today, as always, by going to my second favorite place on the internet, start.spring.io. I'm going to call this Beautiful, and I'm going to bring in the GraalVM support. I'll bring in Dev Tools. I'll bring in the web support, and I'll bring in Thymeleaf support. There is no checkbox here for the Wim Deblauwe integration, but we'll just add that manually. Go to our pom.xml and dependencies, Spring Boot Thymeleaf, and voila. Okay, so 3.40 HTMX Spring Boot Thymeleaf. All right. So we've got a very simple application up and running. First things first, we're going to create a simple template here called todos.html. And we're going to build a component model, a controller to work with and support to-dos. So what does a to-do look like? Well, let's just create our simple domain and get that out of the way right now. And we'll have class to-dos, static to-do, string title, private, static final atomic integer, okay? And we'll say return new to-do id dot, okay, there's our to-dos. Okay, so there's our basic domain model, such as it is. Not all that complex. I could be using Spring Data JDBC or MongoDB or Hibernate or whatever, but I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and keep moving. All right, so we're gonna create a to-do controller, and we'll say add controller at response body, okay. At request mapping, actually, we want to specify the root URL for this controller. All endpoints will be under to-dos. And just to get things started, we're going to create a simple endpoint here that returns the to-dos in a list. Okay, I'm going to pass in a model. Okay, a model. And again, this is stock standard Spring MVC kind of stuff. So we'll say model.add attributes. And what are we going to add? We're going to add this set of to-dos that we're going to maintain. Okay, to-dos, new concurrent skip list set, comparing int to-do ID. Okay, and here's this. All right, so we'll just say to-dos, this dot to-dos. Voila. Good. So there's our simple HTTP endpoint. Let's go ahead and write out our template here. Very simple stuff. Doc type, okay, HTML, right? And our HTML tags, head, title, to-dos. And we want one single script tag and HTTPS unpackage.dev /htmx.org at 2.0.1. Okay, and I don't know if it's a, let's go ahead and open this URL and make sure that's the right one. Paste that in. There it is. There's our script. So that's the entirety of the JavaScript code that we'll deal with today. Let's keep going. So now we need a body element. And, remember, we're using two different technologies here. We're using Thymeleaf to render this template on the server side that will then have attributes in the HTML elements that will be picked up by HTMX on the client side. So bear that in mind. We're going to be using Thymeleaf, and it in turn has its own namespace, XMLNS TH http://thymeleaf.org. All right, now let's do this. Let's go through each to-do in the model. Okay, we're going to create a fragment. This is an island of functionality, and we're going to give it a name. And this is an island of markup that Thymeleaf will manage, and that can be re-rendered independent of the rest of the code surrounding it. Okay, and this fragment, we're going to give it a class, to-dos list. Okay, we don't even have to, you can use that for markup and for styling, but I'm just going to give it a name, a logical selector that we can use to find it again in the client side. Okay, so the fragment is for the server side, and the client side will want the style sheet. Okay, so h2 to-dos, and then here div th each to-do colon to-dos. Okay, and we're going to give this a class as well, because why not? And for each to-do, we want to render a button so we can delete the record, and then the content of the ID, todos.id, and we want also the name, right, the title of each to-do. So paste that in, title, and voila. Okay, so we've just got each row. It's going to have a button, an ID, and a title. Let me put that there. Okay, and so I guess we can just try rendering that. So let's try that. We'll start up the application. Okay, up and running pretty quick. If we go to localhost 8080/todos, we get back that. There's nothing in the data. So let's go ahead and add a constructor here to initialize our data. And we'll say for var t, read a book, go to the gym, learn HTMX, right? And also Spring HTMX. HTTP as the engine of application state, surely. So this.add todos.todo t. Okay. Restart, go back here, and there we go. We've got our delete, our ID, and our read a book. Okay, pretty straightforward, really quick. You can see like the markup is 41 lines of code, and it's this very, very small JavaScript file, and we've already got something going. Now this isn't particular, nothing happens, there's no dynamic behavior yet, but you can see we're off to a good start. If that's the entire sum total of the payload being sent back to the client, and from here it's just a matter of like adding some attributes, then we're in a good place already, right? And it's a lot quicker, by the way, than trying to set something up with some of the alternatives that people use on the client side. Notice also that we have DevTools on the class path, right? So I've got DevTools here on the class path, and it's making it so that Spring is not caching these HTML templates, and so they're getting reprocessed by Thymeleaf each time. So if I add those exclamation marks, go here, refresh, and they're instantly available, right? So this is very, very good because now we can make very quick progress in making changes to our markup without actually slowing down. Now I want to support deleting individual to-dos. So let's go back to our controller, and we'll create another endpoint here. Delete mapping, response body, string delete, request path variable, integer to-do ID, and the path will be the media type and then the path will be to-do ID. Okay, so we're going to return empty HTML. So we're going to basically find the element that we want to delete and then remove it from the collection, and then just return nothing, right? And so then for each to-do, this.todos.remove. Voila. Okay, pretty straightforward. Okay, so we're going to just return that, and that's it. That's the entirety of the thing. And we can now create a form and add a form element and so on. But first of all, forms don't support delete. So you need to do some sort of weird translation there. And then second of all, I don't want to have to create a whole form and all that. Wouldn't it be nice if this button just knew how to send a delete? So let's actually use some support here. So HTMX delete equals, and then you give it the path. Now the path, of course, is the ID, right? It's the ID of the to-do, but we have to encode that, and this is going to get a little complicated. So we'll leave this here for a second and come back to it. We want to tell it to target. We want to first confirm that the user meant to delete the thing. Are you sure? Okay, great. We want to tell it to trigger on click. Okay, fine. And we want to tell it to target the nearest .todo. That's this class up here. So it's going to target the outer element, right? And this is some special HTMX pseudo selector that says find the thing that's closest to me, which is going to be the outside to do, and then replace it with whatever comes back from this endpoint. Okay, so let's talk about this. This is an attribute that needs some data encoded in it from the server side. So we're going to do something a little. I confess this could be a little nicer, but it's not that bad also. So we're going to do HTML attribute th Thymeleaf attribute equals th, okay, ampersand or @ ToDos. That gives us a fully qualified path with the servlet context if you don't already have it. Then a parameter, and then what are the values that go into that parameter? Well, it's todo.id. Okay, so and then we have this, and then we have that. All right, so now let's restart that, refresh, and you can see over here it says hx target closest to do, hx delete ToDos 2, ToDos 1, ToDos 3. Okay, so basically this is what's rendered on the client side, but we're already, I think, ready to go. So let's try it out. I'm going to refresh the page, delete number 2. Do I want to delete it? Yes. And I deleted number 2. Easy. And you can it didn't reload the whole page. You can even kind of see number 2 disappear, and then 3 kind of moved up. The DOM redrew itself to reflect the lack of that element there. Not bad. Very, very easy to do. Not painful at all to like kind of understand conceptually what we're doing. Now, of course, what happens if I do this, right? Okay. Well, I'm all out of data. That's what's happening. And so I want to add some data back to the page. So I'm going to create yet another form here. Okay, div id equals ToDos form. And I'm going to give this a fragment name as well. ToDos form. Okay. And I'm going to say h2 add a to-do. And we'll specify an input type equals text. Name is going to be equal new to-do. And the ID will also be new to-do. So remember that we need that ID is new to do, okay? And then button add. So if we reload this page, we've got that HTML there, and there's nothing happening yet, but you can see it's already off to a good start. Now, I want to enhance this to support what we're trying to do here. So first things first, in the button, we'll say hx post equals ToDos. We'll post to the endpoint, surely. We want to include some DOM elements, namely new to do, in the request, because there's no form that sort of limits what would get sent otherwise. We have to opt in. We have to manually include certain fields. We want to specify that we're going to update the to-dos list, okay? And the to-dos list, of course, is up here. So we want to update that. And we also want to update ourselves as well. So we'll have a swap OOB equals true. Make sure that's hx include. And of course, hx trigger is click, just like before. Okay, so there's this is the hard part in the client side. We need to, of course, account for this in the server side. And here, we can create a new PostMapping endpoint, which returns an HTMX response. This is from Wim Deblauwe's amazing library. So add the request parameter is new to do, string new to do, and we'll say this .todos.add todo.todo, okay, model. And of course, we need the model here to update the state of the UI. So add that attribute ToDos, this .todos, voila. And then finally, we're going to return an HTMX response. This is from Wim's library. And what we're going to do is we're going to say we want to render the template called ToDos. Remember, when we see this string here, or this bit right here, if I just said view like that, this is referring to our template. And it's being passed through something called a view resolver. And the view resolver is going to take whatever the view name is and apply some heuristic, and then that'll arrive at the actual template. In this case, it'll just default to something like source main resources templates plus whatever plus .html, right? In this case, it's ToDos. So we have that source main resources ToDos.html. And there's a special Thymeleaf specific syntax that says ToDos, the template, and then this fragment called ToDos, right? And we're going to also do ToDos form, okay? So we have both things there. provided. Okay, fantastic. Let's go ahead and restart. Refresh this page. Okay, we've got our data again. Now let's try adding a new one. Learn HTML. Voila. It was added automatically. You didn't see anything. It sort of shifted down. Everything moved down as opposed to a full reload. And again, from the client perspective, not a lot was added here. There was no translation required. It just worked. So again, very, very dynamic, very fast. If you look at the results, if you actually looked at the response that's being sent back here, you can see it's just sending back a partial page. It's not sending the whole DOM. It's not sending the whole HTML, doc type, head element, all that. It's just sending back just the part that needs to be re-rendered. So it's efficient too. This is one of the nice things about the integration that Wim has worked up here, is that it's giving us the ability to send only that which is necessary. Now friends, obviously this is just the beginning. We've only begun to scratch the surface here. HTMX can be used for all sorts of other things. It has integrations with WebSockets and service-end events. There is even the ability to trigger an event when a page DOM element is updated or something like that. You can have it trigger an event in JavaScript. So if you want to do JavaScript, there's some options there. There's some opportunities there, but you'd be surprised by what you can get done without ever running a line of JavaScript. Thanks, my friends, as always, for watching. I hope you got something out of it. And as always, we'll see you next time.